Hello everybody. So Tuesday was May the 4th, be with you, Star Wars Day, and in honor of it, a new Star Wars animated show dropped on Disney+, so today we're going to talk about The Bad Batch. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the first two episodes of The Bad Batch, since those are the ones that have been released so far. The way I'm going to structure the video is I'm going to give a non-spoiler review of the two episodes. Then I'm going to give a spoiler review, going into more specifics of just kind of what I want to talk about in each. And then I'm going to give some predictions, although I don't have many predictions, but I'm going to give sort of the predictions that I have for where the show is going. But first, I'm going to give my non-spoiler review. So The Bad Batch follows Clone Force 99, a group of genetically altered clones that are trying to figure out their way in the galaxy that now has the new Empire rising. And so I think that this show so far is doing a really good job at kind of bridging the gap between Clone Wars and Empire. Like, sort of figuring out, like, what was that like? Like, what was that transition like for people to go kind of abruptly from, the Clone Wars is very much in motion to all of a sudden it ends and then there's the Galactic Empire. What was that like? And it shows the immediate, as the first episode is titled, aftermath of Order 66. And it shows the transition from Republic to Empire and from clone troopers to stormtroopers. And it's definitely going to explore that a little bit more as the show goes on. And I think that because of that, this is a really kind of important show, because it really does, like, showcase a very specific point in the Star Wars timeline that we haven't really seen before. Like, we've seen stuff in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, but it's all been pretty much on the, closer to A New Hope side of things. We haven't really seen, like, what was, again, as I said earlier, what it was like for people seeing the Empire start to rise up. What were those early days like? And so I think that's why this is definitely a show to check out if you're a Star Wars fan. And I think it's even more of a show you should check out, especially if you're a fan of Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the animated show. Because I think that, this is in the style of Clone Wars, and it pretty much, the animation style of Clone Wars, and it pretty much, like, goes straight, like, it's a pretty much straight spin-off of that, because the Bad Batch were introduced in Season 7 of Clone Wars last year, and so this is very much a direct spin-off, a direct continuation of the Clone Wars show, and so far there have been kind of some returning characters. I won't spoil too much, but there have so far been some returning characters from Clone Wars showing up here, and I'm sure that's going to continue to happen throughout the series. And so, to conclude my non-spoiler review of The Bad Batch, the first two episodes, it's very good, explores an interesting point in the Star Wars timeline, and it's very much a thing you should check out if you're a Star Wars fan, and even more importantly, if you're a Star Wars The Clone Wars fan. And by the way, you don't need to have seen Star Wars The Clone Wars to really understand this. It certainly helps, but, you don't need, it's not like, there's nothing really in the episodes that you need to have seen The Clone Wars to watch them. You can kind of go in just with knowledge of Star Wars in general. It just, it helps. But now, let's get into some spoilers. So to start out, I want to talk about kind of the big thing in the beginning of the episode, which is, of course, Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels. I thought that was really cool that they had him in the beginning of this as a Padawan. As soon as they said his name was Caleb, I put the pieces together quickly, also because it's the same voice actor, which I think was a bit weird to have, like, the same voice. Like, he's significantly younger here, so he shouldn't really have the same voice as, like, Like, he's like 15 here. He shouldn't have the same voice he has when he's 30. So that was a bit weird to hear, like, that voice coming out of his body at, like, that age. So that was a bit weird, but I guess that was also kind of just probably like a production choice to kind of make sure people knew, like, this is Kanan Jarrus. And so I thought that was very cool that they had him in the beginning of this, and that, you know, they didn't just kind of bring in just like a random Jedi that we haven't seen before, or like recreate an Order 66 moment that we've already seen. Like, they showed something that we haven't seen yet in like movies or TV. Like, I think it was in like some like comics or something, but we haven't actually seen it in like, you know, in movies or TV. So it was very cool to see you know, that whole story that Kanan obviously said in Star Wars Rebels, and we get to see kind of how that happened. I'm sure there's like some contradictions with it of like what was already known about Order 66 and like Kanan's experience with Order 66 and like what is shown here, but you know, it's still cool that they chose to do that. And I'm also very glad that I watched Star Wars Rebels last year, because this certainly wouldn't have had as much of an impact if I hadn't. And so you could actually watch my videos of watching Star Wars Rebels for the first time last year by clicking the card up there. But moving on, let's talk more about Order 66, because you get to this moment where one of the clone troopers, you see, gets the hologram from Palpatine, and he's like, execute Order 66. And so they execute Order 66, they kill Kanan's master, and so Kanan is like afraid, or Caleb is afraid of the clone troopers. Now, he's afraid of the Bad Batch, who haven't turned, who, you know, they did not get affected by Order 66. Like, they don't turn. They're as confused as everybody else of what's going on. And so they're just kind of like, you know, why is everybody else killing the Jedi? Like, what is happening here? Like, what is Order 66? Except for Crosshair. Crosshair does turn a little bit. We'll get to that later. But, so, Hunter, the leader of the Bad Batch, he lets Caleb go, and he goes off to spend the next few years until Star Wars Rebels. So then all the clones are called back to Kamino, so the Bad Batch go, and they get back in there very much confused as to what's going on, why all of the clones are, you know, were called back here, why they're very much confused about what's going on, and so is the audience, but for different reasons. Like, you know, the Bad Batch, they're confused in the show of why everybody turned on the Jedi. We, of course, know about Order 66 and the inhibitor chip and everything, and so we're confused because we're like, why did the Bad Batch not turn? They're also clones, so what's going on here? Why did everybody else besides them turn? And then we get our answer. They go to their rooms, and Tech tells everybody, you know, explains to everybody that because they're genetically altered, that's affected the inhibitor chip in their head, so it doesn't work. You know, it's preventing it from working, except for Crosshair. But they haven't really explained why Crosshairs, it actually did work for him, but it did, and slightly, not as much as everybody else, but it did start to work slightly on him, and that comes back again later. Then we're introduced to Omega, and, you know, she's introduced as this random little girl on Kamino who's the medical assistant, and she also has kind of a mysterious origins to her. And so, pretty much immediately you piece together, she's a clone. You know, she has the same accent, she has, you know, the same kind of facial structure. You figure out pretty much immediately, she's a clone, a female clone. And so, then you kind of are wondering why. And haven't really explained that yet, but it's revealed later that she's a clone, and she's the 5th genetically altered clone, because they tell Tarkin that there's 5 of them, and Tarkin just thinks that Echo, like they're meaning Echo is the other genetically altered clone, because there's 5 members of the Bad Batch, but Echo is not a genetically altered clone. He was just a normal clone who just had so much, so much, like, stuff done to him when he was captured that now the inhibitor chip doesn't work, because as Tech says,
"You are more machine than man."
Which I think that's a very interesting thing they did there, because it's kind of like what a lot of these, like, animated Star Wars shows do, is, like, they kind of take these famous lines from the movies and they have characters say them in, like, a different context. So this is obviously the line that Obi-Wan says to Luke in Return of the Jedi, talking about Darth Vader. And so I thought that was cool that they threw that in there. And yeah, so Echo, because he's more machine now than man, the inhibitor chip does not work correctly for him either. Then we get this training sequence with the Bad Batch, and they find out that they're using live rounds in the equipment, and so you're kind of seeing, like, alright, the Empire, they're bad from the start. They ain't good. Which you already know, but that's nice kind of like indicator of, like, okay, yeah, they're using live rounds in a training sequence. That's in a training exercise. That's not good. So yeah, I really enjoyed that whole training sequence there. And then they get assigned to a mission. They're told that there's some insurgents that they need to take care of, and so they go off. They're told they have to kill them, and so they get there and they realize there's something going on here. This is not what Tarkin said it was. So they go down, they talk to the people that they're supposed to be killing, and we find out Saw Gerrera is there. And he's with a bunch of early rebels and refugees, and you're starting to see kind of, like, pretty much from day one of the Empire, there were rebels. Like, pretty much immediately, the Galactic Empire was, started, and people immediately were like, this ain't good. So, and there immediately starts to be some people rising up as rebels, so I thought that was very interesting to see there. And so Hunter decides to call off the mission, that, they're not insurgents, this isn't what they thought it was, and so they decide to leave, but there starts to be some tension between Hunter and Crosshairs, because Crosshairs, Order 66 did work for him a little bit, so he's loyal to the Galactic Empire, and so they have a bit of tension going on there, but they decide to go back to Kamino, because Tech reveals that that Omega is a clone, obviously, and so they go back to Kamino to get her, get captured, and then the Empire and the people in Kamino, they take Crosshairs and they amplify the effects of Order 66 in him, so now it's to its full effect on Crosshairs, and he completely turns on the Bad Batch. Meanwhile, they escape from where they're being captured, they try to escape, and then we get this battle between the rest of the Bad Batch and Crosshairs. They obviously end up escaping, and they go off, and that's where the first episode ends. And now we're going to get into the second episode, which is significantly shorter than the first one, so there's not going to be as much that I'm going to talk about, but there's still some interesting stuff that happens in the second episode, like the return of Cut. So Cut is a deserter clone that we were introduced to at some point in the Clone Wars series. I don't remember which season, but we were introduced to him, I think, in one episode. I think he only appears one time. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure there's only one episode with Cut in it, and he has, he's a clone, but he kind of, he deserted everything, because there was like a battle that went wrong, and so he left, he started a family, he's not doing the whole soldier thing, and so the Bad Batch go to find him and, to kind of just get some help. And then we get to see kind of like the early Empire starting these, like, new currency, this new currency and these new protocols and stuff that we obviously know from later, from like the, later in the timeline. And so we get to see some stuff with like the chain codes and, transferring the Republic credits to Imperial credits and stuff like that. We start to see all of just kind of that stuff, which I think is very cool that this show is doing, as I've mentioned before, of like really showing this early Empire and this really like new era of the Empire. We've always seen like, we've always seen the established Empire in, the movies and shows, and it's cool to see this, like, this Empire where they're just getting started. They don't have everything in place, but at the same time, we also get to see, like, that it was very abrupt, this whole thing of, like, I've said this before, but, like, the Clone Wars is just going along, and then, boom, now we got Galactic Empire, and there's really nothing in between. It's just Clone Wars, Galactic Empire. And so, I think that's very interesting to see that kind of, like, abruptness to it, but at the same time, the kind of, like, gradual kind of stuff being put in place. And so, we learned about the chain codes and how, it's going to be more difficult for them to leave the planet without getting these chain codes that they need, so they have to forge those, and there's a whole heist that goes on with that whole thing. And it's also cool to see, like, classic, like, infiltrating the Empire, going up against, stormtroopers, or I guess still clone troopers, but it's, like, in the style of Clone Wars animation, and so it's very interesting to see that, because it's like, we've always seen, in this animation style, clone troopers are good guys, and now we're seeing they're bad guys in this, and so, I think that's very interesting there, and so, they have to go infiltrate the Empire base, get these chain codes, and get them to the group so they can leave, and then we also get this interesting, like, father-daughter relationship with Hunter and Omega. I think Star Wars has kind of found this, like, new storytelling element to it with having, an unexpected father-child relationship in their shows, like having, a man have to kind of go against his, his prior rules for, to take care of a child. You had, obviously, in The Mandalorian, you had Mando and Grogu, and here you have Hunter and Omega, and I wonder if they're going to keep going with this. I definitely think that's a very interesting thing that they're doing. And even in this episode, you see kind of a connection to Mandalorian, of like a kind of a repeated story beat where Hunter wants to leave Omega with Cut and his family because, he just doesn't think that, that the life of the Bad Batch is a good life for her. And so that's very similar to what happens in Chapter 4 of The Mandalorian, where Mando wants to leave Grogu with the village people to have kind of a better life. And so it's very interesting to see this kind of like, this kind of new story element that it seems like Star Wars is kind of having now. And also back to the whole thing with the chain codes, there's a very interesting line that Echo says, where basically he says that, clones always wanted names instead of numbers, and now everybody is trying to get a number instead of a name, and so, with the chain codes, and so I thought that was it's kind of a profound statement there, so I thought that was very, very interesting. And so, now I'm going to get into my predictions for where I think the show is going to go moving forward. I don't have many predictions, but I will say I think that Omega is going to be very important, because I think Cut in this episode says that clones are, they always make clones for a reason, and so there's definitely something, important about Omega, like why did they make a female clone, and like what is her purpose in all of this, and so, that's definitely going to be an important aspect of the show. Besides that, I think that we're going to continue to get some kind of returning characters from Clone Wars and maybe other Star Wars projects. I think we're going to get Rex at some point. That was in the trailer, so it's not really a prediction. I'm hoping we're going to get some Vader in this. Not sure how likely that is, but that would be very cool if we get some Vader in the show. And I guess just one final prediction is, I guess the Bad Batch are probably going to have to die by the end of this. I don't know if it's getting multiple seasons or not, but definitely, if not by the end of this season, by the end of, the full series, they'll probably have to die since they're not in future things. It's gonna have to be something that happens there. Maybe, like, they'll get Order 66 fully happen to them, or they'll die, or they'll go into hiding, or maybe like a mix for like a few of them die, a few of them have Order 66 happen, a few of them go into hiding. We'll see, but there's definitely going to be something that's going to have to happen to kind of explain, where they are for, the future, the original trilogy and future, the projects that take place in the future. So, but that said, those are my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of The Bad Batch. I am very much enjoying it, and it's kind of been something that has really not... It's been on my radar as something that's... like, it's kind of gone in and out of my radar. Like, it's kind of been like every few weeks this year, I've thought like, oh, what's happening with The Bad Batch? And then eventually they confirmed it was going to be May 4th, and so then I was kind of, every few weeks I'd be like, oh, alright, The Bad Batch is going to be May 4th, that's cool. And then like a week ago, pretty much each day I would realize, oh yeah, Bad Batch. So it wasn't really something that I was very excited about. It was something I probably should have been more excited about than I was, but I just wasn't really that excited about it. But then I watched it, and I really did get into it, especially starting out with the Caleb Doom thing. I thought that was a very good choice to kind of get people into it. And so, yeah, that definitely caught my attention immediately when they started that. So I definitely have been enjoying the show a lot more. Not really a lot more than I thought I was going to, but just I knew I was going to enjoy it, but it just wasn't something that was I was like, oh, I can't wait for Bad Batch. I like it, but it's not something that I'm I was counting the days for. And I'm still not really. I'm still not it's not like something like WandaVision or Mandalorian or something where I'm counting the, I'm spending my whole week thinking about, oh, I can't wait for the next Bad Batch. I'm just kind of oh yeah, Bad Batch, new Bad Batch episode. So, but I am very much enjoying the show. I think that it's exploring some interesting stuff in the Star Wars universe, giving kind of, a good, interesting look at this, like I've said before, a specific point in the Star Wars universe that we haven't explored before, and it's definitely going to be a very cool show moving forward. And I think that it may be better than Clone Wars, only because I think that I like the more, connected storyline in shows rather than the, the whole arc format of Clone Wars, where they have these kind of very much like pocket, just kind of, stories, 3 or 4 episode kind of, like pocket stories of just like each battle in the war. Just definitely an interesting concept, but it just, it's more interesting for me to see kind of a more cohesive storyline through a show. So I think that this is going to be, at least in that aspect, a little bit better than Clone Wars, to see just this more cohesive storyline through it, in the animation style of Clone Wars. So it's definitely a show that I'm really enjoying, and this review has been dragging on for a little bit too long, so I'm just going to end it right here. Please comment below maybe some of your predictions for the show, if you have any better predictions than mine, and also, please remember to give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.